Imagine standing on the African savanna more than 2 million years ago, long before cities, farms, writing, or even fire as we know it. The sun is rising over dry grasslands. Acacia trees cast thin shadows on the earth, and somewhere near a riverbank, a small group of ancient humans moves carefully through the landscape. They are not strong like lions. They are not fast like antelopes. They do not have claws, horns, or sharp teeth. Yet, in their hands, they carry something that will quietly change the future of life on Earth, a simple stone with a sharp edge. This was the world of Homo habilis, one of the earliest known members of the human family. Their name means handyman, not because they built houses or invented machines, but because they may have been among the first human relatives to turn raw stone into a survival tool. They lived in a dangerous world, surrounded by predators, hunger, changing climates, and constant uncertainty. But instead of relying only on muscle, they began to rely on something more powerful: observation, memory, cooperation, and the growing intelligence of the human mind. Before we continue this journey, if you enjoy learning about ancient humans and the hidden story of our origins, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support gives me more motivation to create better, deeper, and more meaningful videos for the community. Homo habilis lived mostly in East Africa, roughly between 2.4 and 1.5 million years ago. Their fossils have been found in places such as Tanzania, Kenya, and Ethiopia, regions that today are famous among scientists because they preserve some of the most important clues about human evolution. But Homo habilis was not fully human like us. They were small, with long arms, a face that still projected forward, and a brain much smaller than ours. Yet compared with earlier ape-like ancestors, their brain was larger, their hands were more capable, and their behavior was more flexible. What makes Homo habilis so fascinating is that they seem to stand at a turning point. Behind them was the older world of Australopithecus, creatures that walked upright but still carried many ancient traits. Ahead of them was the world of Homo erectus, a more advanced human ancestor that would walk farther, grow taller, and eventually spread beyond Africa. Homo habilis lived between these worlds, like a bridge made of bone, stone, fear, hunger, and intelligence. To understand Homo habilis, we must imagine life without comfort, without safety, and without any guarantee of tomorrow. Every day was a test. Food was never certain. Water had to be found. Predators could appear from the grass without warning. A careless moment could mean the end of life. In this world, Homo habilis survived not because they dominated nature, but because they learned how to read it. Their eyes watched the movement of animals. Their ears listened for danger. Their hands searched the ground for stones that could be useful. A normal rock meant little to other creatures, but to Homo habilis, the right stone could become a cutting edge. By striking one stone against another, they could create flakes sharp enough to slice meat, scrape plants, or open bones to reach the rich marrow inside. These tools were simple, but they represented a giant mental leap. The stone was no longer just part of the landscape. It became an extension of the body. This is why Homo habilis matters so deeply in the story of humanity. They show us that survival was beginning to change. Strength still mattered. Speed still mattered. But intelligence was becoming a new kind of power. A creature that could not outrun a predator could still survive by thinking, learning, remembering, and working with others. A creature that could not tear flesh with its teeth could use a sharp stone instead. This was not technology as we know it today, but it was the first quiet spark of technology. Their diet was probably flexible. They may have eaten fruits, roots, seeds, insects, small animals, and meat from carcasses left behind by larger predators. They were not mighty hunters in the modern imagination. They were opportunists, survivors, and careful gatherers of whatever the land could offer. But when they used tools to cut meat or break bones, they gained access to energy-rich food that may have helped support the growth of the brain over many generations. Homo habilis likely lived in small groups where cooperation could mean the difference between life and death. A group could watch for predators, share discoveries, protect young ones, and pass on useful behavior. They may not have spoken with true language like us, but they probably communicated through sounds, gestures, expressions, and actions. A warning cry, a pointing hand, or the repeated demonstration of how to strike a stone could carry important meaning. In this way, Homo habilis was more than a creature trying to survive. They were part of a slow transformation, where learning began to matter more, tools began to shape behavior, and the ancient human mind began to awaken. But Homo habilis also reminds us that evolution is not a straight road. For a long time, people imagined human history like a simple ladder, with one species neatly becoming the next. First came the ape-like ancestors, then Homo habilis, then Homo erectus, and finally modern humans. But the real story is far more complex, more mysterious, and more beautiful. Many ancient human relatives lived at overlapping times. Some may have competed, some may have adapted in different ways. Some disappeared without leaving descendants. Homo habilis may have been one of our direct ancestors, or they may have been a close relative standing near the path that eventually led to us. That uncertainty does not make them less important. In fact, it makes them even more fascinating. Homo habilis lived during a time when the human family was experimenting with new possibilities. Upright walking had already changed the body. Free hands had opened new opportunities. Bigger brains were beginning to change behavior. Simple tools were beginning to turn weakness into advantage. In their world, the future was not guaranteed. Nothing said that one day there would be cities, art, science, music, or people looking back across millions of years, trying to understand them. Yet somewhere in their small daily actions, the first outlines of that future were already forming. When a Homo habilis individual picked up a stone, chose the right angle, and struck it to create a sharp edge, it was more than survival. It was a sign that the mind could imagine a result before it happened. It was a sign that experience could be remembered. It was a sign that knowledge could be repeated, shared, and improved. That tiny moment, almost invisible in the dust of ancient Africa, was part of the beginning of technology. They did not know they were important. They did not know that millions of years later, we would give them a name and study their bones. They simply lived, searched, feared, learned, and endured. But through them, we see one of the earliest chapters of ourselves. Not the chapter of kings, empires, or civilizations, but the chapter of hunger, stone, courage, and adaptation. Homo habilis was not modern human. They were not even close to us in many ways. But they carried something precious, the beginning of a new strategy for life. Instead of only accepting the world as it was, they began to change how they interacted with it. And from that simple shift, the long human story began to move in a new direction. So when we look at Homo habilis, we are not just looking at an extinct species. We are looking at one of the earliest sparks of human possibility. A small figure on the ancient savanna, holding a stone tool in its hand, standing between fear and discovery, between animal instinct and human intelligence, between the old world and the future that would one day become us.